scale with the hospital facility, which is there on the site today. This is a reuse of the Wilbur School in Sharon, Mass. And that's about 75 housing units, and they're all rental units. So is that something, maybe reuse of a portion of the hospital building or some residential, adding nice character with some additional wings of development? Okay, now the survey portion from the phones. Great, all right, thank you. And then a similar photograph, but a different type of use that could occur in a similar building. An artist live-work space. So it might be something that's makes it more available for artist studios, invites an artist community into the site in some manner. Would that be seen as good or bad? All right. Now also, senior living for the front site, just as we thought about senior living for the back site. This project is in Burlington. It's called Stonebridge, and it's 84 units. Is that something that's appropriate or inappropriate?
These are big units.
The unit sizes?
Yeah, they're like with spans.
The unit sizes of the examples that I've been giving was the question, and they range with each project, but have maybe 700 to 1,100 square feet in that example from Sharon. So that's a range that's probably smaller than a single-family home, and then maybe similarly sized. Okay.
First time I went to New York, my aunt was right in the heart of the city, and she had an apartment deep down. Next time I came, she was up in the sky.
All right, looks like everyone's got their answer in. So mixed use on the front property. So helping to define the frontage on Lynnfield Street. This is typically residential above a commercial or retail or restaurant ground floor. You can see two examples there. Don't necessarily judge the architecture of these examples if you don't like that, but just the idea of mixed use with a commercial ground floor, residential above. The example to the left is in Salem. The North River Apartments example on the right is in Concord, Brookside Square. All right, mark it on your sheets and on your phones. Great, thank you. And now, as opposed to mixed use, which would stack the uses, just plain retail stores. So probably single story. These are a part of a retail complex in Wayland Center. The photographs are actually of restaurants, but local stores, hardware store, something neighborhood serving. That work for you on the site? Not so much. as an example of how we'll use this information, if there were a lot of desire for a retail store, then we would focus in our study about what type of retail could be supported by the market. So we'd be able to tell you, yes, maybe a retail store might be something you like. It looks like there's a need for a local furniture store, something like that. Okay, restaurants. So what the picture actually is of restaurants. So this could be a destination restaurant of some kind in the neighborhood. It could be a neighborhood restaurant that everyone goes and hangs out at. Is that something that would be desirable or not at all? Okay. On phones. Okay, we're almost done. So this is an image from the North Shore Medical Center Village, the medical village. And the question is about commercial or medical office type spaces. So something that would be compatible with this, it might be additional just general office space, it might be medical office space. Is that something that would be desirable for the remainder of the site? Or no? Then some form of clinic or nursing home, a step up from assisted living, which would have more focused care in-house in the facility. And this is an example from Ashland. Okay.
Medical clinic would not include a marijuana dispensary, is that correct? Or is that
No,
not so much of a stretch?
We're not trying to sneak that in anyway.
No, I understand that, I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, I think that would have to be clarified as a separate use that's desired. And from the reaction of many of our regional communities, it's not assumed that that is a desired use. But certainly, if there is desire for that for some reason in the community, let it be known. Okay?
Let's say,
Okay. And then, so this is an interesting one. So billboards, outdoor advertising is included in the current zoning as allowed by special permit. So we just wanted to put that out there because this is also a service of our studies, maybe cleaning up the current zoning for things that you might not want to see. So if there's potential that a developer or next party owner of those sites might find the traffic volumes to be desirable for a billboard, and that could help their revenue stream. That would be allowed by special permit under the current zone. Is that something that's good or bad? We might have found the most consensus so far. And then similarly, in the same vein, greenhouses are allowed as of right today, which would be non-commercial, but also commercial greenhouses are allowed by special permit. So we thought that would be also useful to bring to your attention and ask you if that would be a use you'd like to see. A few more questions. Thank you for your patience. Then lastly, should open space be considered? In the Lynnfield Street frontage, I would qualify that this is likely to be a smaller open space, not a full site of open space, but it could be a plaza, pedestrian area. But is that important to have that as a feature on that portion of the property? All right, last two questions. So these are both open-ended. Well, I guess there's three. Last three questions. The first is just to clean up on the Lynnfield Street property. Were there any other opportunities that were not mentioned here that you would like considered open-endedly? So anything that we haven't talked about that you think would be a great idea? Throw something out. Food truck stands.
School,
Cool.
middle school. Excuse me, has the city at all considered taking all of it and making a new middle school, which we need desperately? Putting the 6th grade at 500 Lynnfield Street and the 7th and 8th in Woodland? Has that been a consideration at all?
The question has been about the city's consideration for these properties. In our preparation for the study and getting ready for this meeting, we discussed with the Economic Development Corporation and the mayor's office. There's been no interest expressed in these properties from the city's perspective for school facilities or other facilities.
That doesn't mean that they would take into consideration that, right? That's what you're saying? They have not shown any interest, but they could be interested in that, right?
To us, no interest has been expressed from the city's perspective about this would be a property that they could use for any purpose. So I guess maybe there's a circumstance, maybe like a charter school might find it interesting as a site.
We need a new middle school.
All right, never mind. We tried. Training school in the health field, anything that will prevent a Dover Amendment use, medical offices, not school, school. All right. And the last two questions before we get into the open portion, which we have about an hour left for, so we've been moving along pretty well. So these last two questions are about trade-offs. Trade-offs between those two halves of the property, the rear portion and the front portion. So would you increase the density, would you increase the amount of development that can occur on the Lynnfield Street portion of the property to increase the open space on the Woodland Ave? So in other words, increase development on the front to decrease development on the back. If they're packaged together in the zoning, were made as a package, you could potentially set a framework where you push development in a direction like that, as an example of the outcome.
Not me.
Okay, very good. And the last question is sort of the inverse of that. So would you increase density on the rear portion of the property to decrease density on the front portion of the property? So would you rather have it kind of all even, put more stuff on the back, have less stuff on the front, and have it all spread around nicely? Thank you very much, and make sure at the end of the meeting you can put the forms on the back table where you signed in. That'd be very helpful to us. So just a little bit, circling back as to how and why we're gathering this information. So we really want to understand the neighborhood and community's perspective in that diagram of the interests that are involved. As we've been talking with, we'll continue talking with the city and North Shore Medical Center to understand what their interests are in better detail. But we're also thinking about the site, what's physically possible on the site, what can fit. If we're talking about mixed use, how much mixed use? If we're talking about single family, how much single family? We're also considering what's legally permissible. So that's the zoning conversation. And there's a certain reality about the zoning today, which is the current zoning. But what we're thinking about in this study is how could the zoning change, if it wants to change, to create a legally permissible environment for something that the community wants to see happen. There are also other legally permissible routes of which the city has less control, which was mentioned on the comment screen just a moment ago. So the Dover Amendment allows, it's a state legislature amendment which allows educational uses, religious uses, and nonprofit uses to be exempt from local zoning. So if a use were to qualify under one of those exemptions, religious and educational being the primary ones that are used, they could do something not abide by the current single-family residential zoning. So they could reuse the hospital facility for a use which is sanctioned under government, for example. That there's not necessarily a way to completely stop something like that. That's why the law exists. But there is a way through the market of the property, the market forces, to open opportunities which might be better for a developer, more interesting for a developer financially in other ways, to redevelop the property that might take Dover Amendment uses off the table. So that's another consideration that we're looking at. And we're also, through this study, thinking about financial feasibility. We don't want to, if through our research of your answers this evening, there are some really great opportunity and uses, we don't want to come back to you and say, congratulations, you all agree, it's really great, and not do any thinking about financial feasibility, and tell you that, we agree with you, single-family homes will work because they might not pencil out to be the thing that would work. So we need to report that to you. We're thinking about the land value because that will be something that North Shore Medical Center is thinking about in their disposition of the property and the market context as well. And we'll be using a database we have access to, which is called CoStar, to help in that process. And the impacts. That's right. The impacts were mentioned as well, and we will be thinking about the impacts once we get a certain recipe illustrated for what might happen. So we're trying to check off all these boxes through this process and present back to you all in September some opportunities. We probably won't have it all fully worked out. September's not that far from now, but we'll have enough options figured out so that you can weigh in on them again. So what might that look like? We took it upon ourselves just to go ahead and put a rough illustration together of what could potentially happen under current zoning. So this is a planning concept. It should have more caveats on this slide than it does, but it's for planning purposes only. No one's permitting a project with this, but it's very telling because it shows us that when considering for the wetlands that I pointed out earlier, on the rear property, the Woodland Avenue property, you might get in the neighborhood of 24 single-family homes. A land planner who is maybe a little more skilled than I am might get 26 or so, but it's in that neighborhood. So on the front, you could get about 18 single-family home lots. But we've left ghosted in here the substantial outline of the hospital facility, which we think is valuable enough, both in terms of its either reuse or cost prohibitive enough in terms of its demolition cost, that you would not no developer would come in to prep this site for 18 homes or 18 home lots. So it's going to be looked at as a reuse potential or someone taking it down to make way for something that they get enough value out of to justify its demolition. So we're going to look into that in more detail to understand it better, but that's a first cut in terms of what the site might look like. So here, if you were to just see the medical facility reused in some kind, that might be a more likely outcome. But yet, we need to do a lot more work ourselves to understand what could a potential reuse be, and then look at your feedback from this evening to understand what other things we might throw into this recipe to see if something else could work that you might actually be able to support. So that is the overall approach to our study, and hopefully we've made the outcomes clear. We're happy now to take questions and answers. Mark and Mary Jane are going to do a little scribing for us just to make sure we've got your comments down and your questions and thoughts. We might not have all the answers this evening, but we'll make sure that we get responses as they come. And I'll try to repeat questions as they come up. So start with that.
Josh, re-explain the Dover Amendment.
Yes. So the Dover Amendment is a Massachusetts general law, and it is a amendment which has kind of fought against the ability to discriminate against certain types of uses through local zoning. So religious institutions is a good example. So if you have a religious institution, you don't have to be subject to the local zoning. You could put a church or a mosque on a property that you want to. The same protection applies to educational uses. And I think I failed to mention before agricultural uses. So in a context such as this site, it's not likely that it's going to be an agricultural use type of exemption. It would be potentially someone finding a way to reuse a facility through an educational or even religious exemption. But that allows them to put that use on the property without being subject to the use restrictions of the local zone. Better explanation?
I'm just trying to understand how zoning and the ability to change zoning interfaces with the land's owner and their interest in obtaining value for the property. So to what degree can the city alter zoning in order to get something that they're more comfortable with, or as opposed to the owner's interests?
I think that the simple way that in this relationship I see potential zoning recommendations interfacing with the Dover Amendment is if you were to allow more market feasible options to occur, then the Dover Amendment options would be less likely. Because while they may be exempt from zoning, they're not exempt from having to make it work from a market and financial feasibility standpoint. So if you're looking to put a church into the facility and reuse it, that might have certain economics with it. If you're reusing that site for a relatively dense mixed-use property, as an example, not saying that that's what it would be, that mixed-use development might be more profitable and revenue-generating than the Dover Amendment. In that case, you would reduce the likelihood of a Dover Amendment use. Yes, sir.
If I understand the situation right now correctly, the area from Lynnfield Street to Woodland Avenue has been rezoned by the city council to a medical village, and that includes the present standing hospital as well as the proposed emergency room. I have to say, I was representative in the determination of need process for a neighborhood group of 27 taxpayers and who filed a petition under the 10 taxpayer application. And our major concern was to preserve and maintain Union Hospital at that site as a full service medical facility, but that didn't happen. And the second concern that we had was the possibility, as partners had proposed, about the site becoming a entirely behavioral health, mental health facility. And our concern was that for the scope that our partners was proposing, that site was not appropriate. And that the same feeling that the behavioral health aspect of a hospital belongs with a full-service hospital. There's been a behavioral health aspect of Union Hospital for 30 to 40 years, and that has not been a problem. But it was not the scale that they were proposing. My concern and the concern of the other people in the neighborhood is that now that this has been zoned as a medical village, how does the Dover Amendment and the possibility that partners or some other owner wants to turn the site into a full mental health facility, because that, I believe, would be a concern for reasons that many of the people in this room have expressed. The proximity of 2 elementary schools, a kindergarten in the neighborhood. So that's something that I think is a concern for all of the abutters and the neighbors.
Thank you for the comments and questions. I'll just clarify on the medical village. It is an overlay zone, which was approved. That overlay zone has in it only the use of medical village overlay, which was done almost procedurally to allow the new facility to be constructed. The medical village overlay could be something through our study, which we add recommendations to either strengthen it in some way or amend it. So that might be an avenue for some of our recommendations.
Just to clarify that, are you saying that only the 4.5 acres that makes up the medical village was rezoned, or
No, it was
became an
the full,
overlay district?
the full
The
property.
advertisement in the paper indicated that it was everything from Anchor Road to Dartmouth Street back to North Woodland.
Yes, it's the full property. Just my clarification was more about it being an overlay zone was the mechanism that it was used. And that overlay zone contains information only about that use being allowed. So it's
So any other use would have to be approved by the city council?
the overlay zone is very narrow, only allowing that medical village use to occur. So that, and it's an overlay, meaning the underlying zoning, the current zoning stays as it is. So it doesn't change anything about the underlying zoning. So it's very limited impact, the overlay zone.
May I make one other comment? The one aspect that I haven't heard discussed, and that I think is very relevant for myself and other people that live north of the site, is the fact that there's a 48-inch drain that runs through that site that is a wetland that wasn't indicated. Even though it's a culverted stream, it is listed as a perennial stream, and it feeds all of the flow from north of that site pretty much.
Up in this area.
Now, it runs right through, it actually runs right along the edge of the existing hospital. Right, it's
right under
a 48-inch culvert that goes under the whole site.
Under the hospital.
Thank you, that's great information. We'll make sure that we confirm the location.
Then they gotta find something to do.
Yes, sir.
Now, if you change the zoning, how much are all the properties in the area, will they be affected by the zoning change? In other words, if somebody has a piece of property and change the zoning to multifamily, someone 3 streets away can build a multifamily building?
No, given the context of this study, I think it'd be very advisable to only, if zoning were to be changed or an overlay were to be discussed, it would only affect the properties that we're talking about in question for the medical facilities. It would not extend into the neighborhoods in any way. It wouldn't change your individual property zoning. So that we're not even thinking in that way.
Okay. I'm looking at, and I'm gonna say conservatively, you're talking 40 homes. Conservative, absolute rock bottom minimum, 40 homes. And now, I'm not an expert on that. 2 kids per home, where are they gonna go to school? All right, let's just say one, let's say 40 kids. You're good. Have you looked at Shoemaker School? See the goings on there already? Have you done any traffic studies as to say what's going to happen when people go to work and try to get out onto Lynnfield Street? We have one working traffic light in the area, and it's on Regina Road. Okay? And it's pickup time and drop off time. Don't even think about going on that street. Is that going to be considered into it? Probably half the school right now is special needs. Are you going to throw them out of there to make room for all the kids that are going to be living in these new homes? And if anybody who's tried to go to work either by heading out of Lynn or heading into Lynn, they can testify to the traffic on Lynnfield Street. Okay? There's times of the day I have to sit through 2 lights on Regina Road before I can take a left to get out and go home. There are 7 school buses twice a day on Regina Road already. That's not even including the ones that park on Clearview. Has anybody considered that? And don't you think it should be considered before you start doing all this wonderful stuff? Because our property values are going to tank. You people haven't looked at anything. Yeah, you got all your things, and you're comparing Concord and Sharon and Burlington, but I haven't seen one Salem of a city or a town comparable to Lynn. You're showing all these wonderful projects in all these upscale communities.
So thank you for that.
Do an accurate study, and do everything. Don't just look at the property that you think you're going to develop. You gotta look at the impact that you're going to have.
Well,
Regina Road is a disgrace. It's impossible to get down there. There's all kinds of developments up behind us over there, and now you're going to add even more to it.
we hear the concern about school-age children, parking and traffic. Well, traffic.
No, it's parking. If you try to get out onto Lynnfield Street during rush hour, and it's a parking lot.
We hear that loud and clear, and we heard it a little bit earlier too. We will be able to study relative to traffic, and traffic would be studied relative to what traffic was at the peak of the hospital's operation. So that's kind of the baseline which the neighborhood is.
You know what? You keep building and building and building. When I bought my house, there was no Bow Ridge, there was none of the developments up on Judge or anywhere else up behind us. I could actually enjoy my property. And with everything that's going on now, it's on overload. The school committee has decided that this is going to be the special needs school of Lynn. So we got all these buses, and they tell us what to do on our street. No one cares. No one cares. And this is the answer we get. Oh, you'll consider it. You've got to consider strongly how all these people and all this development is going to get in and out of that development. There's one working light, it's at Regina Road. And everybody, virtually everybody, if they're going to, especially if they're taking a left onto Lynnfield Street to get out of Lynn, they come down Regina Road.
Yes, ma'am.
So my question really is, how much does our opinion, if you have an overwhelming, similar opinion, say we all voted A or we all voted B, how much does that really affect? I mean, in your experience with developing or creating visions for other developments, has the community really had an impact as to the decision of the city or the owner zoning?
Yeah, I think that in my experience, that simple Venn diagram actually is a very good way of understanding whether or not a project or a process will advance. So if one of those parts is out of alignment or not interested, then it can be a really slow go in terms of getting a project off the ground and finalized and implemented. That includes the community. So the community needs to be an active partner and supporter of the process. I think that when you find that overlap in the center of those 3 circles is when a project actually happens and happens with some expedience. But if the community here wants to obstruct the project, I mean, you do that. But I don't know if it's in all of your best interest, but that could happen.
Two comments. I remember that when Union Hospital, firstly, Lynn Hospital was closed down when they said all the resources were going to be in Union Hospital. And now we are just moving and seeing how the resources of our healthcare is just moving away. So I'm just wondering, and this comment that I want to pass it on to North Shore Medical Center is if the original object of this piece of land was for health services. And so it dawns to me how they want to transform this property into housing, which I know we need, but at the same time, I just feel that they need to compromise a little bit more of the original purpose of this. And so with that said, I recently, I am a community organizer and I went to visit some schools and other people among our community, but specifically Lynn Classical School. They were, the students, we asked the question, what would you like to see in Lynn? And especially in health services, and they say more training, more school, more areas for them to develop in science and job opportunity. And I remember when Lynn used to have the nurses schools and stuff like that. So I know that Lynn has a lot of potential in the health business industry. So I would really like to see this property being compromised in some housing because we need that, but at the same time, go back in the original purpose, and that was the health field and taking care of our seniors, have the opportunity and create careers for our youth, and especially these young people that are getting out of high school. They want to see a career path to stay in Lynn because they love their neighborhood. So I think that we should partners should invest in that because that's what this community wants. Wouldn't your grandchildren stay here? They want to stay here. It's a family-oriented city, so that's what they want. They want to stay in Lynn, taking care of their parents and grandparents because they're aging. So I think that partners, if you can pass that comment, they should focus on that too. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you for making a comment. Well, you're very clear speaking for our partners in this study, which would include partners. But I will say that they aren't desiring a certain use or outcome. They're really looking at disposing of the property, which they're no longer will be using as of 2019. So they're not focused on housing, for example. Just to say that they're looking for any market opportunity that would occur on the property after they sell it.
Have they considered selling it to another hospital group?
They will still have a presence on the site, the North Shore Medical
Yeah.
Center,
Uh-huh.
Medical Village overlay, or the Medical Village Center, and that property they want to see, which would be their neighbor as well as your neighbor. They want to see it to be a compatible use with their uses.
So they're doing what's right for them and not what's right for the city of Lynn. Yes. The answer to that is yes. It's a yes or a no. It's yes. They're doing what's right for them and not what's right for the city. Because
I think that's a matter.
a city of 90,000 people certainly doesn't need a hospital.
Yes, sir, all the way in the back.
I have a two-part question. You mentioned earlier in your presentation a couple of hospitals that had closed quite a while ago, and they're still in the process of being developed. The question is, are those hospitals in vacant properties right now? And my second part of the question is, regarding your work and your studies, how much of the physical plan of the building are you folks looking at from an architecture and engineering standpoint as to what reuses of those buildings make sense or don't make sense?
So I'll take the second part first. We'll be looking at the existing facilities in a general standpoint. The resources of our study, we don't have a full engineering and architectural team on board. I'm an architect myself, so can make some conceptual level judgments about facilities, just in terms of the likelihood of whether or not a reuse would occur. But there are, if a reuse is identified as an avenue, there would be subsequent engineering and architectural code, health, safety, all sorts of studies that would be required to follow on to that effort. On the hospitals, which have been vacant for some time, Malden since 1992, Quincy since 2014, yes, both facilities are currently unused and waiting their next life. The facility in Malden, I believe since it has been some time, does have some ongoing maintenance and upkeep issues.
The hospital itself, that building, we really would like to see it retrofitted into something else. A senior or some sort of assisted living place would be perfect with the proximity of the medical village right there and all the medical doctor's offices that will be there for these people to get. Now most of them have to take the ride or the Bliss bus or something to get to their doctor's office. If there was some sort of senior housing or assisted living type place there, it would be perfect to be right next door. So that's something the engineering might want to think about.
Thank you.
I don't think you're considering the schools. Have you done a study on the impact of all those houses on the schools? There's two schools there, Linwoods and Shoemaker. Right now, Shoemaker is at capacity. They're 49% special needs kids, and they're also Linwoods. And you're doing all this. We haven't heard a study. Is there a study on an impact of what's going to happen with those schools? Lynn is in trouble. They need more rooms. Next meeting, why don't you come and give us some figures on the impact of what you're saying with the schools? Education is very important. I would even rather see you put up a science center, have a science center as one of the buildings, and let the schools use it or something. Not just, you're making all these things, and you haven't considered education.
I will mention, it won't be satisfactory, it's not specific to Linwoods and Schumacher schools, but MAPC, our agency, has done a study across the region that looks specifically at the production.
Lynn has a problem with space. And you're predicting all these houses. Where are they gonna put the kids?
You're not interested in another study.
City is overloaded now. Okay? You just can't put more crap in the bag. There's no more room in the bag.
We'll follow up with our contacts at the city and see what information we can get about the school system. But that isn't a focus of our effort, but we'll see what we can look at, okay?
Well, it should be a focus of it because it's part and parcel of what's gonna happen to the neighborhood and to the city.
We do, I hear that. Yes, sir.
You know, everybody's concerned about the schools and children. Well, I didn't hear anything about like over 55. Okay, so now we're looking at children, right? And I'm not really, packed up housing, but if it happens, maybe they consider over 55 buildings, houses, single family, like they have down the street, or even that small compact community you were talking about, small houses, not multi-family houses, but something over 55 only. That could be partial answer to stopping all the traffic.
That is the type of outcome that this type of study could point to, is that if school-age children is a complete capacity issue, that's what we're hearing loud and clear, then there are options to potentially reduce that impact through the zoning that's recommended. So this is all very good information. Sir.
Has there been a hazardous waste study done with the property, the hospital?
I will ask that question. I don't know the answer to that.
It's an important question. Because if they find hazardous waste there, they're not building nothing.
There's no issues have been brought to our attention, but we will double check.
options in the presentation, things we're already thinking about. More importantly, I want to thank everybody in the room for being here tonight. It's incredibly important that we have turnouts like this and bigger at these kinds of planning meetings, that we actually have a say to make sure that our needs and our concerns are heard. And I also think folks in the city who mostly. So my name's Jonathan. I have a master's degree in urban planning from Tufts University. I own a two-family home in Ward 3 across from the Marshall Middle School. And I also work in downtown Lynn. I've been working primarily recently on a interactive educational envisioning project similar to this, more focused on the city at large instead of just this one specific site. We've so far talked to about 400 people across the city, different ages, different nationalities, different languages. And three things that I'm hearing pretty consistently that I think make a lot of sense for this site, that are expressed by the people that I've spoken with so far, and I anticipate hearing again and again. When we have open sites like this, we have a real need for more schools, as has been stated a number of times. We have a real need for more economic engines for our families. I've heard the word movie theater thrown about at least 50 times in the visioning surveys. Kids are really sick of having to go to Revere just to get a movie. Instead of all of this development that's been coming into our city, building 1 and 2 bedroom condos at $400,000